Good morning and welcome to Sunday Forum. We're very glad that you're here. This morning, we're going to hear about three programs which our congregation has been intimately involved with for many years. Plymouth provides home for Groveland Food Shelf, the Plymouth Drop-In Program, and for 2 weeks each year, 4 unhoused families from Beacon Interfaith Housing's Families Moving Forward program. Over the years, Plymouth members have given substantially of their time and talents to Groveland, Beacon, and Drop-In. This year, Plymouth's Christmas offering, our treasure, will benefit these 3 community fund partners. Our presenters will help you learn more about Families Moving Forward, reconnect with Drop-In, and learn how Groveland's programming evolved during the pandemic. In a moment, I'm going to turn us over to E.J. Kelly, a member of the Board of Outreach who has been active in all of these programs. But first, just a couple of housekeeping details. If you have a question for any of the speakers, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to write your questions. If you're having technical difficulties, please use the chat function. And now, without further ado, take it away, E.J.
Thanks, Jackie. Good morning, everyone. We're in for a treat today, almost a triple treat, kind of like 3 scoops of ice cream. And unlike scoops of ice cream, which I pretty much choose just by a whim, there's a connection between our treats today. In fact, there's a substantial number of connections between each of the programs and groups we're going to hear from. And I want to tell you a little bit about that connection because it says a lot about how we at Plymouth do outreach, do the community fund, and want to be doing it in the future. The first connection is all 3 of these programs, Drop-In, Beacon, and Groveland, will be recipients of dollars from our Christmas offering. So when you give this year the Christmas offering, you know where it's going to. All 3 of these programs were started by Plymouth. Drop-In turns 50 this year. Groveland's about 46 years old, and Beacon about 25 years old. So these are programs initiated by Plymouth members. And we're not just sharing our treasure with these groups, but we share a sacred space with these groups. All 3 of these programs have aspects of them that take place within the building. Groveland is entirely within the Plymouth building, so we're sharing our space with the Groveland participants. Drop-In, except when they do their various field trips, which are wonderful, uses this building, and people here know them, and the Drop-In participants know Emily and other people in this building, and they're welcome here. And for 2 weeks a year, at least in non-COVID times, we are hosting homeless, unhoused families in this building, in our sacred space. And we're not just sharing our sacred space with these programs, but for all 3 of these programs, we share our time and talent. Groveland has connections with Plymouth volunteers and the Plymouth staff. So does Drop-In. Drop-In has been staffed for years, or has been supported for years by Plymouth volunteers. And the Families Moving Forward program uses a substantial number of Plymouth volunteers, and I don't need to tell you this morning about what Plymouth time and talent has done to help Beacon as a whole. Also, all of these programs do major amount of work in this neighborhood. Basically, about 100% of the Groveland clients come from this neighborhood. Really, all of the Drop-In clients and guests come from the neighborhood of Whittier, Stevens Square in this area. And we all know that Lydia is across the street and is right in this neighborhood, as well as Lone Oak residence, which is just a few blocks away. And Nicollet Square is close by as well. So we're serving our neighborhood when we support these programs. And finally, all 3 of these programs work with each other. Drop-In people use the food shelf. Drop-In or former Drop-In people volunteer and work at the food shelf. The food shelf provides some treats and food to the Drop-In program. At Lydia, there's people from Lydia Beacon program who come to drop in. Larry Johnson runs a writer's workshop periodically, at least in non-COVID times at Lydia. And Jay from the food shelf, who you'll see later this morning on a video, has even served meals during the Families Moving Forward period. So we are nurturing connection when we work with all these programs. So that's the outreach part of this, and why you're going to hear about these three great programs this morning. Let me tell you who's going to talk. We're first going to hear from Larry Johnson, who runs the Plymouth Drop-In program and is a member of the Plymouth staff, and he's going to talk about drop-in. We're then going to hear from Hannah Campbell Gustafson, who is also a member of Plymouth staff, and she is going to talk about Families Moving Forward program. And then we're going to hear from Dave Enghusen, who is director of Groveland, and he will talk about Groveland. So with that, I'm going to see if I remember how to share the screen and turn this over to Larry Johnson to talk about drop-in.
Okay, and you can go to the first slide now that I've taken my mask off and prove that I have a mouth and it's me talking. Drop-in ice cream is always popular with drop-in, EJ. And yes, I think it's true that most people come from this neighborhood, but some of them, even if they move to St. Paul or way up north, they often keep coming because it's meant so much to them. Plymouth has been providing a safe, fun, a place with and a place to do things that might not otherwise be possible to people that have some diagnosed mental illness and or with and for their friends for 50 years. And I've been privileged to be able to run this program. I'm into my 13th year now. And even though there are 6 county drop-in centers, which have quite large staffs and many more services, it's always been considered important that there be a place, a drop-in center for people that want to have some spiritual connection. And I think it's fair to say that everybody who comes totally appreciates the thrust of Christianity that is emerges from Plymouth, the Matthew 25 connection, that if you treat the Jesus saying, if you treat the people who are messed with by the larger culture because they're not, they're poor, they're this, that, or the other thing, they're different. If you mess with them, you're messing with me. I mean, people that come to drop-in, many of them get harassed many places in their lives, and this is a safe place. But the other thing that I think is important, many people who come to the drop-in have grown up in a kind of extremely conservative Christian environment where, if you don't live exactly this way or believe exactly this way, you're going to burn in hell. And I think and some people abused in that situation and afraid to leave that, even though there's a strong sense there's something wrong with this. And I think we've often been able to help people navigate that difficulty by just being here and being able to talk and listen. Okay, you did go to the next slide. Thank you. We have 2 organized activities a week, Wednesday at 1 and Thursday at 3. sometimes the time changes because of the activity, but there's, talent shows, just sitting around playing board games and talking. We have a dance every once in a while. We just did a thing we'd not done before. Bring your favorite music and we'll just sit and listen and talk. And then Dawn, who does art with Dawn regularly, Dawn Hofstrand, brought some things in that people could just make while they were listening. And I think we better do this again. We have a chapel service connected to all the major church holidays, and Beth Faith runs that. But all of the special music, the talks, and the scripture readings are done by members of the drop-in. And then, of course, there's third Wednesday bingo, always the most popular. The most people come to that. And the drop-in folks call the bingo. And frequently, I hear from people, just being able to come to drop-in keeps me from being depressed. It keeps my depression from just taking over in my life. And we know there's other things too, the medications and the work that they do with their doctors, but drop-in is an important factor in the lives of people who come. He's a psychic. Some of the things, there's many times we're able to go out and do something in the community. And I said at the top there, at top left, ice cream. The Dairy Queen is a popular trip that happens at least once a year, usually twice. There's picture there of the gigantic snow sculpture in New Brighton. That particular year, they made a humongous whale. And every year, this group of brothers builds a great big snow sculpture. We've been to Betty Danger's, the restaurant on the north side, northeast, with the operating Ferris wheel, the Science Museum, walks in the Nature Center, and many, many other places. And as I said, often places people might not otherwise be able to go. I'll just, in the interest of time, I'll come back to that if I need to. Next, okay, giving to the community. Dawn has in the past helped drop-in members make gifts. She does art with Dawn, every 2-month cycle, 2 times. But has helped people make gifts to give to the women and their children living at a women's shelter. The bottom picture is this year's Nami Walks team. Nami is the National Association for Mental Illness, and their big fundraising effort every September is a walk. And we created a larger Plymouth team this year and did that walk and raised some money for Nami. Many of the people in the picture are members of the drop-in, but if you look closely, there's some members of the Plymouth congregation. And mark down the whole month of September till we know the exact date for next year. We hope to have a larger Plymouth Nami Walks team next year. And okay, telling stories. We frequently, when I was attracted to knowing I needed a part-time job when I quit working for the schools, when I was attracted to the ad for this because it said must be willing to go with them to Camp Knutson. I had run kids camps in the 60s and a bit when I came back from being a medic. But first I thought, well, you probably got to be a social worker, but they were actually interested in that I was a storyteller. And we do frequent, when we're gathered in the Bolton's room, frequent story circles where people have opportunity. You know, we just go around and there's a theme, like tell stories about being on the bus or stories about random acts of kindness, and people have opportunity if they want to. They can pass, but just informally tell a story from their life, and that often leads into other important conversations. But we also, I have for years, well, actually, my wife and I helped organize World Storytelling Day in 2003 with storytellers around the world. And so every year on or around March 20th, there are events all over the world with a theme, and the inherent theme of if I can hear your story, it's harder for me to hate you. And for a number of years, we were organizing that at Landmark Center, but the year everything shut down, I decided to pull it back to Plymouth and involve Plymouth people more. And then, you know, that's the flyer, but that was shut down, but we will get back to that. Creating art with Dawn, which I've mentioned. We have drop-in members that write stories, write their own songs, and we've put them out in a regular book. And the fall trip. When Nancy Bolton's was still alive and really active in keeping the drop-in going, she and her husband Andy started a fall trip, an October trip, where a big bus pulled up and we went someplace very, very wonderful with a meal and all paid for. And that's been going for 30 years. When Nancy died, Andy kept it going with his now wife, Lynn. And so these are just some pictures from that. And Camp Knutson. Every Labor Day week, Plymouth drop-in goes to Camp Knutson along with members of other drop-ins, and we always get the most slots because Plymouth, the Plymouth congregation generously provides scholarship, which makes it possible for anybody from Plymouth to go, whereas other people have to pay their way entirely. And as people say, Camp Knutson keeps me out of the mental health ward. And during the shutdown, we kept going. We had to operate differently. Zoom tablets provided by Andy Bolton's made it possible to do Zoom. We did bingo by mail. We did art by mail. And we just kept going, connecting with people by phone, however, and now we're back live again. And thank you for your support of the drop-in.
Thank you, Larry. It's a wonderful program. I can tell from being there myself. I'm so glad that you have kept it going all this time. And it's right. Hannah, can you tell us about Families Moving Forward?
Yes. So as EJ said, I'm Hannah Campbell Gustafson. I'm the outreach coordinator here at Plymouth, and staff from Beacon weren't able to be with us today, but I get to work with Families Moving Forward when it's hosted at our church. So it works out well for me to talk about it. So there is a lot that one could say about Beacon. There are so many wonderful programs, including, if you haven't been near Plymouth recently, across the street, Lydia is expanding. I just noticed it earlier today when I pulled in the parking lot. That's a very exciting thing. But one video that I wanted to share that isn't actually about Families Moving Forward. The first one I want to share is Nicollet Square video, which is another program of Beacon. Let's see if we can. If it doesn't work, I can just try to talk. But so Nicollet Square, while EJ is maybe making our tech work, Nicollet Square is another housing, another housing building. It's at, I should know, it's right by my house, Nicollet and 37th. If you've ever been to Butter Bakery, it's on the first, in the same building as Nicollet Square.
The only story you'd like?
Yes, if that's possible.
Well, it is possible. That's a different question.
I think it was.
Is it not, Jackie?
My best friend, she a real.
What's strong with me?
What's strong with me? What's strong with me?
What's strong with me?
What's strong with me?
What's strong with me?
Me!
Me. With me.
Cruising on down Main Street, you're relaxed and feeling good. Next thing that you
How about we stop that one? How about we don't need to listen to that one? If you're able to make the other one work, that's just about families moving forward. For time, we will make that work, but I can talk a little bit more about what's happening with families moving forward right now during the pandemic.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, so actually the room that we're in right now, when we host families moving forward, is one of the rooms where families stay. And as was mentioned earlier, we host families moving forward. In a typical year, we host for 2 weeks, 2 separate weeks, and families, usually up to 4 families spend every night. We eat a meal together in one of the rooms up here, and then each family has their own room to sleep in. But of course, like many other programs, that's been different during these COVID times. So throughout the pandemic, the Families Moving Forward program has continued to support 4 families, but they have been staying in hotels. So for the last while, when it's our turn to host, we help provide meals. I'll just keep talking a little bit and then we can watch the video. Is that okay? Okay. And the plan right now is to continue the arrangement of families staying in hotels through April of 2022. The hope is to then move back into congregations. And so what staff from Beacon said to me is that they've learned a great deal from families about how they've handled the pandemic, and part of keeping families in hotels has been helping to support their safety and self-determination as much as possible. So the fear for health and loss of control that COVID has brought to all of our lives is compounded for people without stable housing, and many Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are often guests of the shelters for families moving forward. So Beacon as an organization has been trying to listen to what families are saying. And so the time, I guess what I mean by this is the time for when families can return to churches has been pushed back largely by what families are asking for. And my sense is that the goal is to make sure that everyone who's in the families can be vaccinated before families move back into the congregations. I will pause and say the rest of this after we watch this video. How about that?
Terrific.
We're a pretty silly and pretty active family. We have 3 small children, ages 7, 8, and 10. We'd like to go on nature walks. Our kids are very outdoorsy, so they enjoy all things nature.
After losing my job of 18 years, it was a pretty tough pill to swallow.
He was living with his mother, with our 3 children. I was living with my brother. We weren't all under the same household.
But with our children's future in mind, we knew that we needed to do something.
He has a brother that moved here to Minnesota from San Antonio about 12 years ago, and they love it. They just kind of stayed and had kind of suggested maybe that we make the move to Minnesota. And so we came up here hoping for the best and for the chance for all of us to be under the same roof again and be a family again. When he brought the kids up here, he was originally going to stay with his brother, but that fell through.
It was an absolute nightmare being here with my 3 children and not having a place to go. For 3 weeks, we were in dire straits, and we had stayed at a friend's house, my brother's, for about a week. Stayed in various motels, thankfully to the Chaska Police Department. Being homeless is probably the ultimate worst feeling I've ever had in my life. I've never been scared. I've never been so frightened in all of my life.
Families Moving Forward got us into Carver Crossing Apartments. And we've been in Carver Crossing Apartments for a year.
It saved our relationship. It saved our children's lives with us. And ultimately, it rescued a family off of the street that was in need.
Things are so much more positive, and I don't have the tremendous weight on my shoulders of, the guilt of not being under the same roof with my children anymore, and I have so much positive outlook on life now.
Families Moving Forward has given us an opportunity to not only have a life here in Minnesota, but to have a life that we can be proud of. They've given us so much without asking anything in return.
So that's just one story of one of many families that Families Moving Forward has served and continues to serve. Another update from Families Moving Forward is that especially in the pandemic, stays have been longer in the shelter program. And so this sort of is one of the many things that helps fuel Beacon's other work around housing development and policy work to make sure that there is affordable housing for everyone. But nevertheless, many families have successfully moved on to housing so they can afford housing that they can afford, and they have along the way met other goals for obtaining their IDs and applying for benefits, education, childcare, increasing income, etc. One thing that is new about Families Moving Forward here at Plymouth these days, I think, we were beginning these conversations right before the pandemic, or at the beginning of the pandemic, but we now have a partnership with the Basilica. So when we have provided meals in the hotels and when we host families this upcoming June and August, hopefully in our building, we will have volunteers from the Basilica partnering with us. This is partially because of other changes that have happened in the Families Moving Forward program in the last few years that they don't need as many host sites in the Twin Cities, but it's also because Plymouth we have classrooms that we can offer so that families get their own rooms, whereas at some other congregations like the Basilica, they were needing to use dividers, which is great, but not as ideal for sleeping. So look for more opportunities for volunteering with Families Moving Forward next summer, and our continued partnership between Plymouth and the Basilica. One last thing that I wanted to say, I'm not sure where I am with time, but one last thing that I wanted to say, just so, as I mentioned a minute ago with Families Moving Forward, that work is so important, and it also helps drive other work that Beacon is involved in, and they've become, the policy work and housing development work is as important as ever. And if you want to hear more about that work, this coming Thursday, December 9, there's a congregational convening. You can attend in person. I don't actually remember where it is in person, but you can also attend on Zoom, which is what I will be doing. And you can find information on the Beacon website, or you can email me or anyone that you know at Plymouth who is involved in Beacon or the Beacon leadership team. And another group that we share space with, Zamaya Theater, is performing at the convening. So that's a chance to see and support them too. So thank you so much for your support of Families Moving Forward.
Thank you, Hannah. And now we're going to hear, we're going to see a video.
Community is
That's going to feature Dave Anghusen, who's the director of Groveland, and Jay Quarterman, who also is part of Groveland, runs the distribution operations. And then Dave will talk to us a little bit, but let's look at this.
Community is pretty much all of us.
We got people from Ecuador, Honduras, Togo, Liberia, Egyptians, Ethiopia, Bosnia. We got some Russians.
The food shelf and the church, they're more than just an organization. They're like extended family. There's also empathy that starts developing. People get to know each other. They get to understand that not everybody is just like them. Not everybody thinks just like them. And we all grow.
Clients are also people who are coming back, giving back. In the morning before I even get to work, we got a lot of people here waiting to help me to put out the food so they can eat. You know, we couldn't open unless they would allow us to be here in this space here. And I think it has been a good partnership actually, because we had to change from, at one time we were able to be outside, and then that changed.
In fact, that happened overnight.
Yeah.
Because we knew that we couldn't really give out of our existing location. It just wasn't big enough to have any social distancing and to really have people safe. Basically kept the church open for the food shelf and the school. The church arranged for a vaccination. I would guess 90% of our clients ended up getting vaccinated.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of those people, they might not have had IDs, and so if they don't get vaccinated, they can get sick, they can spread it, and we're pretty proud. We really haven't had any breakouts at all. It's very obvious that Plymouth feels responsible to share its gifts with the community. The assistance that Plymouth has given the food shelf over the years, it's helped us with money, it's helped us with space, it's helped us with encouragement, it's helped us during difficult periods. We are able to help feed thousands of people, and by extension, the congregants here are helping those people too. It makes it a better community, a better place for all of us because of that.
Well, that was a short look and a fun one to see all the people outside. I've been around the food shelf for a long time. I was hired probably in Georgia on my way back from living in Florida for a year and a half, back in 1993. And so I've been around for quite a long time and seen a lot of changes. At one time, we only would see 800 people coming through a month. That number went up when we had the Great Recession. From that until the pandemic, we were around 2,000, maybe 2,500, and it started backing off a little bit. The pandemic came, as the video said, overnight. We basically had to leave the space that we had been in and set up shop outside. We set it up like a farmer's market. We bumped up to about 3,500 in March, and in April we had over 8,000 people. Dropped down to about 6,000 in May, and then the George Floyd killing happened. We were a little afraid that was going to bump the numbers up more. It actually, in many ways, helped relieve the stress though, because drop-in, pop-up food shelves sprang up all over the place after that incident. And since then, we've been sitting right around 4,000 people a month. We give out about 1 million pounds, actually more than 1 million pounds of food every year, which is an amazing amount of food. As the video said, Plymouth's helped a lot with that. One of the things that helped us during the pandemic is we stayed with a customer choice model. People aren't just handed a box of food or a bag of food. They actually choose what it is that they want to eat. And given the variety of people that we have, Jay talked a little bit about where many people come from. We have a diversity in ethnic terms. We have diversity in sexual identity. We have a diversity in housing. Some people live in apartments, some in many apartments over a year. Some live in a room. That room might not have anything but a microwave, might not even have a refrigerator. So we have to be able to have food for people that can cook, for people that can't cook. We've provided food to the encampments that sprung up. And so there's just this huge diversity. One of the things that happened during the pandemic, besides having to move out right away, is we pretty much lost all of our volunteers at that point because of the fear of the pandemic. Many of them elderly, and then we actually lost a lot of our neighborhood volunteers as well. We ended up doubling our staff, our paid staff. We don't have any full-time staff, but we do have part-time staff. And slowly, people started coming. The other thing that happened is we were pretty used to the diversity that we had before the pandemic. But when the pandemic hit, there were programs, there was unemployment, there were stimulus checks. Well, there's a huge number of immigrants that don't have the right to refuse those kinds, to receive those kinds of benefits. And so all of a sudden, we went from having maybe 5 to 10% Spanish-speaking people to over 50%, again, almost overnight. So we've had to adapt, and that's helped us grow. We've had new people come in. That's both caused irritations for some, but it's also been a chance for them to grow. I often say that we're the island of misfit toys. If there isn't a place for you somewhere else, there will be a place for you at the food shelf. And that's worked pretty well over the years. It's not always the most efficient, but in terms of personal growth, it's helped a lot. We've had people with fairly severe special needs who would talk with pantomime. We've had many people that have had serious diseases, people living with HIV for years, and all of them have been welcome. Again, there's usually a learning process, but pretty soon people say, they're not so bad. Those relationships, besides the food, there's a nurturing that helps. We've been able to get people into jobs that are outside the food shelf just because of connections that they've made in there. Thanksgiving, we were chosen to give out 100 turkeys with Justin Jefferson showing up from the Vikings. And it was kind of fun to rub elbows with celebrity. But the big thing is that we were the first location that he had a big event. And his brother Jordan said that they had researched us. And so it was good that our efforts aren't going unnoticed. We wouldn't be able to do any of this work if it wasn't for Plymouth. And I want to thank all of the people of Plymouth, and thank you for your support.
Thank you, Dave. I am going to look for questions, and we don't have any right this moment. Dave, I'm going to kick things off, and then we may have some other questions come up. But would you tell us about Groveland's food? Where does the food come that we give out? And tell us a little bit more about that.
For years, we just handed out canned goods, and we would get potatoes and carrots and onions, and that would be it for produce. But a little over, well, probably about a year before the pandemic hit, we got involved with something called Food Rescue. And the Second Harvest organization would put us in contact with grocery stores, and we get the items that they have that are getting close to date, or they just don't look quite right. And so they make them available to us. when the pandemic hit, because we were one of the few places that maintained a customer choice model, we were able to benefit because most of the other food shelves went to just putting things in boxes, putting them into trunks of cars. Most of our people don't have cars. But we ended up picking up quite a few more stores. So that would have been difficult, but along with the stimulus, we were able to get a van, a refrigerated van, which helped a lot. So we have 3 Trader Joe's that we pick up food from. We pick up from the downtown Lunds. We have 2 Kowalski's that we pick up from. There are a number of local bakeries that we pick up from. The Aldi's on 25th and Lyndale provides food to us. And it's meant a lot of driving, but all of these locations have allowed us to put up almost a supermarket. And a lot of the food that places like Kowalski's or Lund's or Trader Joe's is discarding actually looks better than the groceries you might pick up at a corner store. And so you hear a lot about food deserts, which refers to especially the fresh food. We have it all. We have a lot of veggies that someone will say, well, what is this? And sometimes we know and sometimes we don't. And we get deli food that they can pop in. Meats. Don't know what that is.
Go ahead.
Okay. So that food rescue has allowed us, when I said we give out 1 million pounds plus of food, during Minnesota Food Share, a pound of food is equated to $1. If we had to actually pay for $1 million or 1 million pounds of food, there's no way that we could do it. But the food recovery program helps us tremendously.
Thanks, Dave. Larry, do you have any, I know you have people that are in your program that are passionate about many things, Camp Knutson among them, but also just really are very wise people who have written some beautiful things over the years that kind of gives a sense of who some of your participants are. Do you have anything you can share with us today?
Yeah, a lot of things that I left out. You know, people write things and give them to me, you know, independent of the writers group or, but we have put together 2 books and we're doing another one. But when I started, Harry Searles, who I think many people in Plymouth know, he even worked in the maintenance department for a while. Harry passed away a couple of years ago, but when I started, he was, they were considering, you know, just ending funding at the county level for Camp Knutson. And Harry was strategically lobbying to, you know, I found him talking and writing to people I knew in political arenas from other parts of my life. And so I just joined in, reinforcing, especially with people I knew. But Harry was also a extremely talented writer in general. So this is a thing that appeared in the, I think, well, this is the first book, the Book of Drop in 2015. It's My Heaven by Harry Searles. Camp Knutson, how I love you. You are my first home, my second spouse, my only child. You are my job and my drop-in. You're my friends, my heart of hearts, soul and spirit. Your trees are verdant, your lakes pristine. Just beneath heaven lies Camp Knutson, beneath camp all else. You are God's home and my heaven, and I love you. You are mine. For 35 years, I've shot your arrows, caught your fish, and sailed your waters into God's beauty and on to man's Dairy Queen. Is there another like you? Can you name one such? You're good for me. My mind relaxes and I stay out of 8 South, 2 East, D Wing, Cottage 3. You, Camp Knudsen, have loosened the hold of those places. Thank you, God Almighty. Your Camp Knudsen has made us free indeed. That's a thing among many.
Beautiful words, Larry. Thank you.
Could I jump in with a question for Hannah, if I could? Hannah, you talked about the fact that the families moving forward in a normal year are here for their evening and sleepover. Then what happens to their day when they leave in the morning? Can you tell us anything about?
Yes, I can. So, and this is a little bit different these days because, or different than it was in the past because there's only one
Day center.
Yeah, one day center and one route is what I was gonna say, but that's not the right words. But so there's a day center in, and I should remember what town it's in. Is it in Chaska? It's in Scott and Carver County somewhere. There's a day center where families go during the day. So there's a bus or a van that will take them there if, I think it depends a lot on what their life looks like at the moment. So if people are going off to jobs, they might leave from here if they have cars, depending, or they might leave from the day center. And children also are in school if they are school-age children. So, but one thing that I think is really important about a program like Families Moving Forward is that children will stay in whatever school district they started in, or they will stay in the same school district no matter what church they're staying in. So there's the importance of that continuity. And then at the day center, there are I think a couple of staff caseworkers who will work with them on all sorts of goals. So whatever the goals are that they need to reach in order to have enough income and stability for housing, including finding housing, right? I mentioned earlier how hard it is, and we all, I think, know how hard it is to find affordable housing. So I think sometimes even if people have the income, it can take a while for the housing to happen. But yeah, I think, maybe this is true of lots of programs or of other programs, but I think that is one of the most important things about the Families Moving Forward program is that there is this incredible there's an incredible network of people who are supporting them. So there's the staff, but then there's also volunteers at the churches. And you didn't ask about this, but I'm just gonna say, I think that one of the wonderful things about volunteering with Families Moving Forward is that we and you are helping to show people that there are people who care about them and that believe that they have worth and that they, and if I think about myself, I have 2 young children, and if I were experiencing homelessness, I can imagine that the way that society in general sort of looks at a parent who is experiencing homelessness, just a person in general, but a parent specifically with children, the way society looks down on those individuals. I think Families Moving Forward volunteers play an important role in sort of counteracting that. So I went off on a tangent, but I think that's all important.
A good one.
No, and Hannah, I'm glad you brought that up because we rightly think about housing and addressing homelessness and unhoused as a bricks and mortar issue, and it is. But so much that's important is also the supportive services that groups like Beacon and others provide.
Yep.
So that, because people need that sort of support with parenting, with finding jobs, with resume building, and we forget how big a piece of what happens at Lydia or at Nicollet Square. I know at 66 West, Beacon uses Simpson, another one of our groups, to actually provide the supportive services. So it's a huge, more invisible piece of what needs to be done to really help people who are trying to get back on their feet. So that really a terrific point. And the point about what Plymouth people do, and we listen.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, and even just by showing up, even if people don't want to talk or really interact with us, just the fact that volunteers are showing up and saying, this is worth my time, you are worth my time and my, I think for someone who, well, yeah, has experienced a lot of stigma or whatever else, that's valuable. It's,
It's, and days can be frustrating. We all come home at times frustrated from our regular day. And if you don't have a home to come to, and then you've been turned down for housing again, or you've had to come up with the money for an application and that's not working. There's been some times when I've been at Families Moving Forward and all someone wants to do is just tell you how hard their day is and the fact that you're a listening ear. And sometimes their spouse or their partner can be that person, but they've gone through the exact same thing. So for Plymouth members to be able to just listen and say, I hear you, it's just a wonderful thing we do when we have Families Moving Forward here.
I hate to break in, but I'm afraid our time is up.
okay.
But I do want to say before we go that we hope you will consider these programs when you make your Christmas offering, because the offering will go to these 3 organizations, and we think they're very worthy. But I hope you'll come back next week, because we have an equally vital program. Nina Johnson, our Director of Children and Youth, will bring several of our children and teens, and they'll speak about the topic Childhood on Pause. 20 months is a significant chunk of a life of a child, and we want to know what our kids have learned over this momentous period. What have they sacrificed? What hopes do they have for the future? And what do they need from us right now so that there will be a future? So it will be a wonderful program, and I hope you'll return and listen with us. Thank you.